My name is Margaret Hale, and I am 62 years old. For most of my life, I believed I had mastered the quiet, predictable rhythm of adulthood. Wake early, brew strong coffee, manage my executive team at the firm, return home to a tidy house, and spend evenings in gentle conversation with my husband, Thomas. After 40 years in corporate strategy, I was finally approaching retirement, finally letting myself dream of a slower life filled with travel, gardening, and late afternoon reading sessions. I had always considered myself a woman who planned carefully and lived honestly. I married Thomas when I was 34, after years of dating men who promised stability but delivered chaos. Thomas, in contrast, felt steady. He was gentle, thoughtful, and soft-spoken. And though he came from a very different background, a large, sprawling Italian family whose gatherings felt like festivals rather than dinners, our home life remained calm. Over the years, his family came to rely on me for things they never quite asked for outright. Help with taxes, business advice, sometimes a loan. They'd always say they'd pay me back, but I never expected them to. I told myself it was fine. Thomas had so little family left besides them, and I didn't want to be the cold wife who refused to share. Still, I sensed a subtle shift in Thomas over time, an eagerness to impress his siblings, a hesitation when money came up, a certain defensiveness when I asked too many questions about their ventures. I brushed it off. Families were complicated. The turning point came on a crisp February morning, the day my company awarded me a $240,000 performance bonus. It was the largest I had ever received, validation of decades of work, late nights, and sacrifices. I felt proud, deeply proud. I had planned to put half toward my retirement fund and use the rest to renovate our home, perhaps even install the sunroom I'd always wanted. Thomas congratulated me with a hug, though I noticed his eyes flick toward the printed statement on the kitchen counter. There was a quiet calculation in his expression, one I had never noticed before. Later that evening, as he took a call in the hallway, one he thought I couldn't hear, I caught the faintest pieces of the conversation. Yes, she got it. No, she hasn't allocated it yet. Let me talk to her first. A small chill crawled up my spine, but I told myself not to overthink it. After all, husbands talk to their families. Maybe I was being sensitive. I went to bed early that night. I remember staring at the ceiling as an uneasy feeling settled into my chest. Something I couldn't name, something that felt like the first tremor before an earthquake. But even then, I had no idea how deep the rupture would go, or how far I would be pushed before reclaiming everything with quiet, methodical revenge. And it all began with a villa I had never seen, a villa I never agreed to renovate, and a betrayal that would dismantle the life I thought I understood. 3 days after receiving the bonus, I woke to an unusually quiet house. Thomas was already up, which wasn't typical. When I walked into the kitchen, he was sitting at the table with his laptop open, face pale, fingers anxiously drumming the wooden surface. "Morning," I said gently. "You're up early." He closed the laptop too fast. "Just checking emails." It was such an innocent statement, delivered in a tone too tight to be casual. I felt the small hairs on my arms rise. Something was off. Later in the afternoon, after my meetings wrapped up early, I logged into our joint account, mostly to transfer my bonus to my retirement portfolio. Only when the balance loaded, my breath caught in my throat. The number was wrong. Deeply wrong. $240,000 were gone. For several seconds, I thought perhaps I'd misread. I refreshed the page. Then again, and again. My chest tightened as I clicked into the transaction history. And there it was. A wire transfer for the entire bonus amount to an account I didn't recognize. My heart hammered so violently I felt lightheaded. I clicked the details. The recipient name appeared slowly, like a cruel reveal in a film. DeLuca Family Holdings. Thomas's family. His brother's business entity. I stared at the screen in disbelief, waiting for the world to make sense again. But nothing aligned. Nothing explained this. The front door clicked open an hour later. I sat completely still, laptop in front of me, transaction highlighted, proof glowing like a wound. Thomas stepped inside, humming lightly until he saw me. His smile faltered. "You're home early." I looked up at him, my voice calm in a way that frightened even me. "Where is my bonus, Thomas?" His face drained of color. His lips parted, but no words came out. I repeated the question, each syllable measured. "Where is my $240,000? He swallowed hard. "Margaret, just let me explain." I felt the room tilt. He began haltingly, sweat gathering at his temples. His brothers, he said, were renovating the family villa in Abruzzo, an old property they'd inherited decades ago. A potential investment, he claimed. A future rental opportunity, he insisted. They needed the money urgently, he said. You weren't using it yet, he added quietly. And they promised they'd pay it back. The villa will triple in value. My pulse throbbed in my ears. You gave them my bonus? I whispered, barely able to breathe. Without telling me? Thomas stepped forward, hands outstretched like I was a frightened animal he had to soothe. I was going to tell you tonight. Margaret, this is for the family. For our future. The villa will be ours too. I cut him off. No, you don't get to say ours when you make decisions like this. His voice rose, defensive. They needed me. It's my family. You don't understand how much pressure they put on me. I stared at him, a man I thought I knew, while something cold and steady crystallized inside me. A single, unshakable thought took root. This was theft. Not accidental. Not confused. Not pressured. It was betrayal. By my own husband. And I realized, in that moment, that everything I did next needed to be deliberate. Quiet. Documented. Unshakably ethical. He had taken my money. Without permission. Behind my back. But I would take something back too, with precision he wouldn't see coming. I didn't speak to Thomas for the rest of the night. I needed distance, clarity, silence. My mind kept circling the same question. How did we get here? How did a marriage built on mutual stability turn into this? I thought back to the early years of our relationship. Thomas had grown up as the second oldest of 5 siblings. His mother died young, and his father passed a few years later, leaving behind a tangle of property, debt, and a romanticized nostalgia his brothers clung to. The villa in Abruzzo was the crown jewel, a crumbling stone home overlooking olive groves, picturesque in a tragic sort of way. Thomas's brothers, Luca and Marco, were dreamers in the most dangerous sense. Always launching new ventures. Always chasing quick money. Always failing. But they had charm, the kind that often fooled people for long stretches before the truth settled in. Over the years, I had noticed a pattern. They would ask Thomas for small favors. Then short-term loans. Then business investments. Whenever I raised concerns, Thomas grew defensive. They're my brothers, he would say. They don't have anyone else. And I, foolishly perhaps, tried to support him. Tried to support them. I believed family loyalty could coexist with boundaries. But I had underestimated their entitlement. There had been hints, little cracks I ignored. The time they used my credit card accidentally. The time they asked for money, just until the vineyard sale goes through. A sale that mysteriously never happened. Thomas always apologized. They always vanished after receiving what they wanted. And I always rationalized their behavior as misguided, not malicious. But now, they had taken nearly $250,000. The more I reflected, the clearer it became. This was never a sudden lapse in judgment. It was the culmination of years of erosion. Thomas had been pulled into his brother's gravitational field for so long that he no longer recognized the cost. And his need for their approval, for belonging, had grown so strong that he was willing to gamble my security, my future, and my trust. As I thought back through these moments, something unexpected happened. The shock I felt earlier deepened, but it also sharpened into understanding. Thomas's betrayal wasn't just about money. It was about identity, about weakness, about the person he had allowed himself to become. But understanding was not forgiveness, and comprehension did not absolve him. If anything, it gave me a roadmap, a clear view of the psychology behind the act, and the strategy one would need to unwind it. Because if his brothers had manipulated him, fine. But he had still chosen to betray me. And I was done covering for any of them. By morning, I felt something new settling through my bones, resolve. Quiet, ruthless, ethical, strategic. If they believed they could take my future hostage, they were about to learn who I truly was. And the first step of my revenge was simple. I would investigate everything. Every transfer. Every lie. Every justification. And I would do it without raising my voice once. When dawn broke, I moved with a clarity that felt almost clinical. Years of corporate strategy had trained me well. When something goes wrong, gather facts first, emotions later. Thomas was asleep in the guest room, his choice after our confrontation. I didn't wake him. Instead, I opened my laptop, pulled up the bank statements, and started documenting everything. Screenshots. Timestamps. Transfer IDs. I printed copies and placed them neatly in a folder with a tab labeled The Villa. Next, I logged into our email account. Thomas and I rarely hid things from each other, until now apparently, but we still shared several digital resources for household management. And that was his mistake. Within 5 minutes, I found an email chain that made my stomach turn. Subject line: Renovation Phase 1 payment received. Attached was an invoice from a construction company in Italy. Paid in full. Using my money. From Thomas's email, I also found messages between him and his brothers. Their tone was celebratory. Finally, we can get the new roof done. She won't mind, it's for the family. Make sure she doesn't move the money before Phase 2. Phase 2. I clicked through the thread. Another invoice was scheduled. Another $80,000 they expected within weeks. My hands went cold. The arrogance. The entitlement. The absolute presumption that my bonus was a shared family asset. I printed everything and added it to the folder. Then I dug deeper. I requested a full transaction report from the bank. I called our financial advisor and asked for documentation of all joint accounts, property holdings, and prior transfers involving Thomas's family. What surfaced over the next several hours was startling. Over the past 3 years, Thomas had quietly given his brothers nearly $60,000, in increments small enough to avoid my immediate attention. My betrayal was no longer a single event. It was a pattern, a long-term erosion of trust. By noon, I had assembled a dossier thicker than a novel. When Thomas finally walked into the living room, eyes red and shoulders slumped, he must have sensed immediately what I had discovered. The folder sat on the table between us. "Margaret," he said weakly. I didn't look at him. "Sit." He sat. I opened the folder. 1 page at a time, I laid the evidence before him, without anger, without theatrics, without a single raised inflection. Every screenshot, every invoice, every email, every transfer. "Do you see this?" I asked quietly. He nodded, trembling. "I was going to fix it. I was trying to." "No," I cut in. "You were hoping I would never know." He didn't deny it. For the first time, I saw the truth of Thomas, not the man I married, but the man shaped by years of familial obligation and weakness. But my voice stayed calm, steady, almost gentle. Because calmness is often more terrifying than rage. "We are going to resolve this," I said. "But not the way you think." He blinked slowly, confused. Because he didn't yet know the scope of my plan. He didn't know I had already contacted the bank. Or that I had begun freezing accounts. Or that I was preparing something far more decisive. My revenge wouldn't be loud. It would be structured, documented, irrefutable. And it would begin with a single, quiet act. One that would change everything. The next morning, I contacted a property attorney familiar with international holdings. I explained the situation factually and provided every document I had collected. Within a few hours, she returned my call. Her first sentence chilled me. "Mrs. Hale, you should know, the villa is not owned equally by the brothers." I felt the room go still. "What do you mean?" "According to the deed," she continued, "the property is legally owned by one person only, your brother-in-law, Luca. Not Thomas. Not the family collectively. Just Luca. And there's more," the attorney added. "The property has multiple liens on it. Significant ones. Liens. Debt. Risk. Meaning Thomas's brothers were renovating a property that was essentially a sinking ship, hoping injections of my money would keep it afloat long enough for them to flip it, sell it, or escape financial ruin. They had not borrowed my bonus. They had seized it as the lifeline they desperately needed. And Thomas? He had either been misled or was too blinded by loyalty to see the truth. Either way, this betrayal had roots deeper than I imagined. I thanked the attorney, printed the deed, the lien records, and the renovation permits, and added them to the growing folder. When Thomas returned home that evening, I asked him to sit again. He did, eyes wary. I placed the deed in front of him. His brow furrowed. "What is this?" "The truth," I said simply. "You gave my money to renovate a villa you don't own. In fact, your brothers don't even own it collectively. It belongs solely to Luca. And it is buried in debt." His face crumpled. No, that can't be right." But it was. I watched realization wash over him, shock, then shame, then something like grief. He whispered, "I didn't know." And that was when the pivotal, defining moment occurred. For the first time, I saw my husband not as a conspirator, but as a man manipulated as thoroughly as I had been. But his ignorance didn't erase what he'd done. He had still violated my trust. He had still given away my financial security. He had still chosen their approval over our partnership. So I told him the truth plainly. I am not going to save you from your choices. Not this time. He lowered his head. I continued. The renovation project stops today. He looked up sharply. They've already started. I know, I said. And that's why stopping it now will hurt them. Not me. Because the next step in my revenge, the step that would turn their entire scheme to dust, was already in motion. And the brothers had no idea what was coming. I didn't fly to Italy. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't call anyone names or threaten violence. I simply scheduled a video call. Thomas sat beside me, shoulders tense, hands clasped tightly as if bracing for impact. His brothers appeared on the screen. Luca with his perpetual smugness, Marco with his feigned charm. Margaret, Luca said, smiling too broadly. We were just talking about phase 2. We're canceling the renovation, I said calmly. The smile faltered. Excuse me? I slid the folder into view. Papers neatly arranged, dates highlighted. My tone remained steady, almost gentle. I know where the money went. I know who owns the villa. I know about the liens. I know phase 2 is going to be funded with additional transfers you pressured Thomas into arranging. Marco leaned forward, eyes narrowing. This was a family decision. No, I corrected, this was theft. And I have already begun reversing the wire. Panic flickered across their faces, brief, sharp, genuine. I continued. The bank is investigating. You misrepresented the purpose of the transfer and targeted funds that were not yours. Because of this, they have temporarily frozen the contractor's payments. Thomas looked at me in shock. He didn't know that part yet. And, I added, because the villa has outstanding liens, the contractor cannot legally demand penalties from me. This is between you and your creditors. Luca's voice cracked. You don't understand the situation here. Oh, I do, I replied. You leveraged my money to save a property you cannot afford. You manipulated your brother. And you assumed I would stay quiet. Silence fell. Heavy. Undeniable. Thomas finally spoke, voice trembling. Why did you lie to me? Neither brother answered. I leaned forward slightly. Here is what will happen. You will stop contacting us. You will not request another cent. You will handle the halted renovation and the contractor disputes yourselves. If you attempt to involve Thomas again, I will move forward with legal action. And what if we refuse? Luca spat. I smiled politely. Then you will enjoy explaining to investigators why you used fraudulently obtained funds to renovate a property with outstanding liens. Silence again, this time thick with fear. The call ended abruptly. Thomas sat motionless beside me. Margaret, he whispered. I didn't know. I swear I didn't. I looked at him with a calm clarity. I believe you, but believing you doesn't fix what you did. His eyes welled with tears he didn't shed. I stood, collected the folder, and walked toward the front door. Because my revenge wasn't finished. Not until I reclaimed control of my home, physically and symbolically. Which is why the next step was the one that finally broke him. And freed me. That evening, after the confrontation, I drove to the locksmith. The decision wasn't impulsive. It was the product of 2 days of calculation. Changing the locks wasn't an act of cruelty. It was an act of boundary setting. When I returned home, Thomas watched in stunned silence as the locksmith installed new deadbolts on every door. Margaret, he whispered, voice cracking. Is this really necessary? Yes, I said softly. It is. He swallowed, eyes glossy. You think I'd run back to them? I think, I replied gently, that for the first time in our marriage, you need consequences that mean something. He didn't argue, didn't yell, didn't beg. He simply sat on the couch, hands limp, staring at the floor. When the locksmith finished and left, I handed Thomas an envelope. Inside was a temporary key. You can stay, I said, but only for now. We are separating finances immediately. You will attend therapy alone. And you will write a full statement for the bank confirming that the transfer was unauthorized. I want accountability in writing. He nodded, tears finally falling. And, I continued, you will have no contact with your brothers. That was when he broke, truly broke. Not in anger, in understanding. Meanwhile, the consequences for his brothers arrived swiftly. The bank froze the transfer. The contractor halted all renovation work. The lien holders filed notices. The entire project collapsed, mid-demolition, mid-scaffolding, mid-dream. The brothers sent frantic emails, followed by angry voicemails, followed by tearful pleas. We didn't answer. It took 4 days for them to realize the truth. I had cut off the only lifeline they ever counted on. By day 5, Luca messaged Thomas, not to apologize but to accuse. "You ruined everything," he wrote. "You let her destroy us." Thomas showed me the message. I looked at him calmly. And for the first time, he blocked his brother without hesitation. That moment, quiet, almost unremarkable, felt like a hinge turning. A long overdue shift in loyalty. As for me, I felt something unexpected rising inside. Not triumph. Not vindication. Peace. The kind that comes when one reclaims a boundary that should never have been crossed. But my story didn't end with financial justice. It ended somewhere deeper. Somewhere more human. In the months that followed, the dust settled slowly. Thomas's brothers cut ties with him entirely, a consequence he grieved quietly. But it was a grief mixed with clarity, the kind that comes when illusions finally fall away. Our separation of finances became permanent. Therapy became consistent. And for the first time in years, Thomas began addressing the emotional debts he had carried since childhood. Debts that had shaped his weakness, his loyalty, and ultimately his betrayal. As for me, I reclaimed my own life piece by piece. I reallocated my funds, rebuilt my retirement plan, and even installed the sunroom I had always wanted, paid entirely with money I controlled, decisions I made, boundaries I enforced. The villa renovation never resumed. The brothers faced their own legal and financial reckoning. And the $240,000? Every penny was returned to me by the bank. But the true victory wasn't monetary. It was personal. I learned that revenge, when done ethically and intelligently, isn't about destruction. It's about restoration. It's about reclaiming what was taken, not through rage, but through truth, boundaries, and unwavering self-respect. Thomas and I are still rebuilding. Not a marriage as it was, but a partnership that now requires accountability, transparency, and emotional honesty. Whether we will last another decade, I don't know. But I do know this. I am no longer a woman who excuses the erosion of her boundaries for the comfort of others. I am no longer the quiet caretaker of dysfunctional people. I am no longer afraid of being firm, decisive, or alone. My revenge was simple. I told the truth. I documented everything. I set boundaries no one expected me to enforce. And I held those who betrayed me accountable, calmly, clearly, and without apology. Sometimes the most devastating form of revenge is ethical clarity. Sometimes the loudest justice is a door that no longer opens for the wrong people. And sometimes the strongest woman is the one who finally chooses herself. If you were in my situation, if someone took your security, your trust, or your peace, how would you reclaim it? I'd like to hear your thoughts.